Elon Musk has just made a revelation that few have noticed, but one that could change everything we know about immigration. From the US to Europe, millions of illegal immigrants are crossing borders. And it's no accident. There's a global agenda behind all of this. An agenda that has the potential to reshape the future of our nations. What many are calling a failure of policy is in fact a deliberate strategy. Elon Musk, along with other experts, has pointed out that the mass immigration we're witnessing is being pushed by globalist powers, whose goal is to alter the demographics of the West in order to create a new, loyal voting base. This isn't about helping the needy, it's about making sure that instead of the people guiding policy, an elite few are the ones who hold the power. In many Western nations, you're required to show identification for almost everything, from buying a gun to boarding a plane. But in states like California, it's now illegal to ask for an ID to vote. This isn't about protecting voting rights, it's about enabling election fraud. What's at stake here is a complete control over the democratic process. Supporters of these laws argue that requiring ID to vote is racist. But is it really racist to ask for ID to ensure that only eligible voters are casting ballots? Elon Musk has called this argument what it truly is, an insult. It's racist to assume that certain groups are incapable of obtaining identification, and it undermines the dignity of individuals. Mass immigration is not just affecting politics, it's also threatening our cultures and values. Naomi Wolf, a fierce critic of the globalist agenda, has said it's impossible to have a democracy with open borders. Mass immigration is flooding the West with people from countries that have no memory or history of democracy, putting our fundamental rights at risk. The reason behind all of this isn't humanitarian. The global elites are pushing mass immigration as a way to create a new class of citizens who are completely dependent on the state. Instead of strengthening our nations, they are weakening them. The result, more fragmented societies, more dependent people, and an easier political control. The global elites are using immigration as a tool to weaken democracies and create a world without national sovereignty. The goal is to turn Western countries into societies controlled by a small group of powerful elites, eliminating what's left of our democratic freedoms. This is a calculated move to establish a system where the people no longer have a voice. As the elites push their agenda, right-wing movements are gaining strength. Across the world, nationalist parties are emerging as the only real resistance to the chaos caused by mass immigration. This resurgence of nationalism is not extremist. It's a fight for cultural and political survival. If we don't act now, we may soon lose our democracies forever. The elites are driving mass immigration as a strategy to control our nations and destroy the freedoms we hold dear. Voters must wake up before it's too late. It's time to take action and defend our nations.
Thank you. President Trump, on that point, I want to get your response.
Well, I would like to respond.
Let me just ask, though, why did you try to kill that bill, and successfully so? That would have put thousands of additional agents and officers on the border.
First, let me respond as to the
Please.
rallies. She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go. And the people that do go, she's bussing them in and paying them to be there, and then showing them in a different light. So she can't talk about that. People don't leave my rallies. We have the biggest rallies, the most incredible rallies in the history of politics. That's because people want to take their country back. Our country is being lost. We're a failing nation. And it happened 3.5 years ago. And what's going on here, you're going to end up in World War III, just to go into another subject. What they have done to our country by allowing these millions and millions of people to come into our country, and look at what's happening to the towns all over the United States. And a lot of towns don't want to talk. It's not going to be Aurora or Springfield. A lot of towns don't want to talk about it because they're so embarrassed by it. In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there. And this is what's happening in our country, and it's a shame. As far as rallies are concerned, as far as the reason they go is they like what I say. They want to bring our country back. They want to make America great again. It's a very simple phrase, make America great again. She's destroying this country, and if she becomes president, this country doesn't have a chance of success. Not only success, we'll end up being Venezuela on steroids. It's taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people are on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme. This is, I think, one of the reasons why in this election I actually have the endorsement of 200 Republicans who have formerly worked with President Bush, Mitt Romney, and John McCain, including the endorsement of former Vice President Dick Cheney and Congress member Liz Cheney. And if you want to really know the inside track on who the former president is, if he didn't make it clear already, just ask people who have worked with him. His former chief of staff, a four-star general, has said he has contempt for the Constitution of the United States. His former national security advisor has said he is dangerous and unfit. His former Secretary of Defense has said the nation, the Republic, would never survive another Trump term. And when we listen to this kind of rhetoric, when the issues that affect the American people are not being addressed, I think the choice is clear in this election.
President Trump, I'll give you a quick minute to respond here.
Thank you, because when I hear that, see, I'm a different kind of a person. I fired most of those people. Not so graciously. They did bad things or a bad job. I fired them. They never fired one person. They didn't fire anybody having to do with Afghanistan and the Taliban and the 13 people whose were just killed, viciously and violently killed. And I got to know the parents and the family. They didn't fire. They should have fired all those generals, all those top people, because that was one of the most incompetently handled situations anybody has ever seen. So when somebody does a bad job, I fire him. And you take a guy like Esper. He was no good. I fired him. So he writes a book. Another one writes a book. Because with me, they can write books. With nobody else can they. But they have done such a poor job, and they never fire anybody. Look at the economy. Look at the inflation. They didn't fire any of their economists. They have the same people. That's a good way not to have books written about you. But just to finish, I got more votes than any Republican in history by far. In fact, I got more votes than any president, sitting president, in history by far.
Let me continue on immigration. It was what you wanted to talk about earlier, so let's get back to your deportation proposal that the vice president has reacted to as well. President Trump, you call this the largest domestic deportation operation in the history of our country. You say you would use the National Guard. You say if things get out of control, you'd have no problem using the U.S. military.
Police, yes.
You also said you would use local police. How would you deport 11 million undocumented immigrants? I know you believe that number is much higher. Take us through this. What does this look like? Will authorities be going door to door in this country?
Yeah, it is much higher. Because of them. They allowed criminals, many, many millions of criminals. They allowed terrorists. They allowed common street criminals. They allowed people to come in, drug dealers, to come into our country. And they're now in the United States and told by their countries like Venezuela, don't ever come back or we're going to kill you. Do you know that crime in Venezuela and crime in countries all over the world is way down? You know why? Because they've taken their criminals off the street and they've given them to her to put into our country. And this will be one of the greatest mistakes in history for them to allow. And I think they probably did it because they think they're going to get votes. But it's not worth it because they're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done. There's never been anything done like this at all. They've destroyed the fabric of our country. Millions of people let in. And all over the world, crime is down all over the world except here. Crime here is up and through the roof. Despite their fraudulent statements that they made, crime in this country is through the roof. And we have a new form of crime. It's called migrant crime. And it's happening at levels that nobody thought possible.
President Trump, as you know, the FBI says overall violent crime is actually coming down in this country.